Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to the Hearthstone Weekly Show, episode number 70. We've done 70 of these things. And this week, it's kind of funny actually. I was considering what kind of deck I could do for this particular week. And I was thinking, yeah, this Wailing Soul Druid that Hyped played was really, really cool. And this is at the Best of the Best tournament, and I think some people might pick it up. And then I realized I did Hyped last week, which means that the last two weeklies have been almost hyped, like spotlights, which is kind of funny. But anyway, as some of you may have noticed, my new microphone is finally here. I finally have it, and it is awesome. There's practically zero background sound. There was a little bit earlier, but that was just a bad connection. It seems absolutely fine now, and I'm really, really happy with it. So I've got a proper mic now, and I'll also be using it when I'm streaming a little bit later, which will be at noon EST, about 2 hours from now, I should guess. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get started, shall we? So, on to the particular list. Now, this is a very interesting list, and the reason I say that is because there's a lot of weird things about this particular list. The first one is that it's running Ancient Watchers along with Wailing Souls. In my opinion, the most underused Naxxramas card in the entire set. 4 mana 3/5, Battlecry, silence your other minions. So all of your stuff, not all of your opponent's stuff. Now, there were some people talking about it originally, which was with Anti-Freeze Mage. And this deck runs over Freeze Mage like no one's business, by the way. It's kind of hilarious. You play Wailing Soul and it unfreezes all of your stuff. But anyway, Wailing Soul was originally thought of as like an anti-freeze card that maybe could do some cute stuff. However, in this particular list, the Wailing Soul is enabling, first of all, it's removing the drawback on Zombie Chow. It's also enabling Ancient Watcher, and it doesn't really punish anything in the deck. Apart from Sylvanas, but Sylvanas is just kind of a must play a lot of the time. So you just play it as like a value play. The only other minor effects you'll be cancelling are like Spectral Knight after it's already done damage. There's Azure Drake is a small difference there. Just one spell damage when you haven't already used it. So yeah. So that has to be in future turns. The other ones are Defender Vargas and Taunt buffs, but again, you can play in a certain way where you just use it as an extra enabler. It's offensive. So anyway, this particular tournament, for anyone who doesn't know, has been on for the last 2 days. It was involved a lot of the guys from Lucky Draw, which I get on Versus Series quite often. And one of their players was actually in the tournament. That was Hit Girl. And I do believe D2 won that particular tournament. There's the bracket on Hearthstone. So D2 won the particular tournament. He was playing this particular lineup, as you can see here. I'll put the link to this particular list in the description, and then there's also the links to all of the other deck lists from the entire tournament. So you can check everything here. And there were some really cool lists, so I would very much encourage anyone who is curious to go look at some of that stuff. But anyway, starting with the actual list, we'll go over his list, and then we'll go over some of the variations you can think of. Alright, so first things first, Innervate. Because Innervate. Not really much you need to talk about on this. It is a Druid deck, and Innervate goes in Druid decks. It ramps up really unfair things. The more unfair things you can pull off here are things like coin Ancient Watcher into Innervate Wailing Soul. I have done that a few times while playing this. But there's some other weird ones you can do, like Spectral Knight is actually really, really annoying to get rid of if you get him out early. Even something like Loatheb, still a 5 mana 5/5 that beats their face in, and can't. And weirdly enough, a lot of people kind of, if you innervate Loatheb, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're just stupid." But in reality, it's a 5/5 that you got out early, and they can't respond to it with Hex, Freezing Trap, Polymorph, even though there aren't that many Polymorphs running around. But you get what I mean. A lot of the responses for late game stuff are spell related. They can't use Lightning Bolts or Wraths or anything. So they have to use actual creatures to do it, or wait an extra turn, then you just tempo them out. So you basically use 2 cards to tempo them out massively. And so innervating Loatheb, especially on turn 3, not so much with coin, but on turn 3 can actually be pretty good sometimes. And While not the preferred one, because he has a bigger effect in the mid game, it's still not bad, and a lot of people do think it's bad. Now, interesting one here, not Savage Roar, One of Wrath. Now, the One of Wrath, from what I understand, is that a lot of this deck doesn't need anti-aggro because you have Ancient Watchers along with 3 Taunt Givers. So you don't tend to need a lot of anti-aggro, and Wrath was just kind of cut because it was less powerful than normal, and there's a lot of space issues if you're running Ancient Watchers, Sun Furies, Defenders, and Wailing Souls. So something had to go. I know some versions have been running 2 of the Wrath, some run 1. I don't think I'd cut all of them, but you can definitely make a comment where I think if you're running double Azure Drake, which I could definitely see, you may want to run double Wrath, because that is a ridiculous spell with Azure Drake, because if you choose one, it either becomes Super Shiv or just the most powerful 2-mana removal in the game. So if you're running double Azure Drake or like a Blood Mage or something, you definitely want to be running double Wrath. Alright, moving down the list a bit. 1 Savage Roar, 1 Fawn. This is kind of an emergency button where sometimes it works, but you don't have space for a double combo. So just 1 combo, always handy. Keeper is mandatory. It's arguably the best Druid card in the game. Behind maybe Ancient Allure. I think Keeper is the best silence in the game, definitely. But Ancient Allure does take the cake in terms of just flat out best Druid cards. But the bottom line is you have to play both. That's the bottom line. Swipe is basically your all-purpose removal, and you really, really, really need it. I would say it's the removal spell which gets you places. You can just use it, if you get it with spell power off Azure Drake, it's just crazy. 5 damage and then AoE 2. It's basically a fused Starfall with spell power. It's really nuts. But against a lot of the aggro, especially with Haunted Creepers, it's really good against Hunter. You can often just kill something and then kill the rest of their board as well with Swipe. It's amazing what you can do, and for 6 mana with this with Hero Power, you can put another damage on the board somewhere, and it's really versatile. Then we've got Ancient Allure, arguably the best card in the deck. Ancient Allure is your draw engine. It gets you out of tight spots, either by drawing when you're top decking, or by restoring life when you're kind of worried about being burnt out but can still win if you have extra life. It's also just a 5/5. It's a really, really good card. One of the more versatile cards in the entire game, and one of the main reasons to play Druid. Now, the last one here is Cenarius. Now, Cenarius is swappable. I'd say Cenarius is probably the strongest, but I know a lot of people don't have Cenarius because a lot of people don't have some of the class legendaries. I do fall in that category where I have some of the class legendaries, but I don't have some of the other ones. Cenarius is situationally very powerful in certain archetypes. The reason is that his overall impact for his mana cost is less than it should be. However, he has 2 different effects, and he doesn't die to BGH. So as a result, he costs too much mana for one of his effects. Like if it was just a 5/8 to summon 2 2/2s, I could see that 8 mana easily, and it used to be 8 mana. But the point is, you can't give both of those effects on a 5/8 for 8 mana. It has to be 9. So depending on the deck, if you can get value out of both in the deck, it's worth it. If you can only really get value out of one side, it's not that worth it, which is one of the reasons why I've been against Cenarius for the longest time. Because for a long time, there were weird scenarios where people were saying, oh yeah, I really want the buff in this deck, and they would always make 2 2/2s. Always. And they would just feel terrible about it. But this deck is one of those rare scenarios where I actually think that Cenarius is incredibly powerful on both sides. First of all, +2/+2 if you're winning in any regard, or just have a board presence, which is very, very likely considering you're running things like Ancient Watcher and Harvest Golems and things like that. You can just buff them all and then swing with everything. But then, if you need an aggro stop, because of the way the deck is, where aggro decks will break through, however, they won't have that many resources left if they do break through because of all the stalling you have in this deck. So when you play Cenarius, the 2 2/2s will often just completely stop the deck. They won't be able to get through them, and then the 5/8 will just kill them. So I would say Cenarius is probably at his best in this deck than I've ever seen him in most decks. So I would say Cenarius is the best late game drop you can possibly have in this particular one. However, there's a couple other options. I've seen people running Alexstrasza. I wouldn't in this particular one. I would say if you don't want to run Cenarius or you don't have him, try either Ragnaros, because you can silence your own Ragnaros if it comes down to it with Wailing Souls or Keepers, or you can run Kel'Thuzad if you don't want your opponent to have BGH targets. And the third one's Alexstrasza. I think Alexstrasza is the worst. I would say Cenarius is the best, and Rag and Kel'Thuzad depends on playstyle and metagame. At the moment, I'd say Rag, but maybe Kel'Thuzad at some other point. It depends. It requires more testing, but I would say Cenarius is definitely the best of the win conditions. Now, onto the neutral cards. As you notice, there aren't that many Druid cards compared to normal. A couple big ones missing, like Druid of the Claw. No Druid of the Claw. Yeah, I was surprised as well. However, having played this deck a bit more, I do think Druid of the Claw could have a place, but you need to kind of redo the deck a little bit into more of like a beatdown deck with double combo and running crazy stuff instead of any late game. So there is a build with this engine that could work with Druid of the Claws and just going full aggro, but this isn't the build. You're not going to have this particular build with Druid of the Claws in it because it's just awkward. If you put them in 4-6, they get BGH'd. I mean, not BGH'd, Black Knighted, and your Wailing Soul silence them, and it's just awkward. But then the cat forms don't really help that much in this deck, although they are decent. So I think if you're on a more aggressive build, you could definitely run that. Maybe with some extra 4-drops would do it. But anyway, so moving on to neutrals. First one, Zombie Chow. 1-drop, completely shuts down aggro. It's the best anti-aggro 1-drop in the game. Why? Because unlike Voidwalker, which forces them to attack it, this thing is really, really good against all aggro minions, not just the ones with 1 life. So against Hunter, this will often kill 3 guys, and with hero power, maybe more. Zoo is the only one that kind of just trades with it, because they have Flame Imp. But I would say Zombie Chow overall is a very, very good aggro stop. And you can get crazy, crazy openings like Zombie Chow, Ancient Watcher, and then like Coin Wailing Soul. And then you have a ridiculous beatdown, and the Zombie Chow is just a straight 1-mana 2/3, which can be ridiculous. So Zombie Chow definitely has its place. It's the 1-drop of choice. You don't have enough support to run Undertaker, and you just wanted a 1-drop, and I would say it's the best one. I've seen Druids run Argent Squire in the past. Zombie Chow is just a better Argent Squire if you're running it for anti-aggro purposes. Next, we have Ancient Watcher. Ancient Watcher is the absolute ridiculous thing you could do with Wailing Soul. Wailing Soul is the engine enabler. However, Ancient Watcher is what you're most likely going to be wanting to use the Wailing Soul on. Straight up 2-mana 4/5 that's going to beat your opponent's face in. And you can give it Taunt. You can give Ancient Watcher Taunt with your Sunfury Protectors, which we'll get to in a bit, and also Defender of Argus. So I'd definitely say Ancient Watcher, very worthwhile on this kind of deck, and along with Wailing Soul is the reason why you'd even run this engine in the first place. Now, onto the first of the Taunt Givers and the best of the Taunt Givers. The reason for it is because 2 mana is not worth the +1/+1 if you're just going for the Taunt. Defender of Argus is better in aggro decks because of the buff, not so much because of the taunts. That's just kind of an added bonus. However, Sunfury, straight 2-mana 2/3 is, if you need it, you can play it out. Or you can put Taunt on an Ancient Watcher, or if you want to go really crazy, Spectral Knights. Yes, a Spectral Knight with Taunt is the most irritating Druid of the Claw ever made. You just can't get rid of it. It's incredibly annoying. But Sunfury Protector, very solid 2-drop, will buff up pretty much anything you need it to, and there's so many good Taunt targets like Sylvanas that it does its work, and does it work well. Now, 1 of Earthen Ring, 1 of Harvest Golem. This is an interesting one. The 1 of Earthen Ring gets you out of some sticky situations against Hunter in particular, and Harvest Golem is just a really annoying 3-drop. I could definitely see running 2 of 1 of these. I think 1 of each is probably correct at the moment for ladder because of the Hunters. Although, if you're in a tournament setting, if you're planning on banning Hunters, you could probably run double Golem instead. It's a difficult call. They're both really solid. You can only really fit 2 3-drops in the entire deck. So I would definitely bounce between these particular 3-drops and kind of see what works for you. Now, 1 of Defender, needed a 3rd Taunt Giver. 4 mana is a bit taxing, but 3rd Taunt Giver. And it's also decent for buffing on things like Zombie Chow. And on either of the 3-drops, the buff can be quite relevant. However, late game, buff not as relevant. +1/+1 on something that already is a 5/5, slightly less relevant than it is on a 2/3, for example. So it's the worst of the two cards between that and Sunfury, but it's still a very, very good card. Now, Wailing Soul, the engine enabler, will, as I said, most likely be silencing Zombie Chows and Ancient Watchers. It can be used against Freeze Mage for devastating, absolutely devastating results. If you see Ancient Watcher and you're playing Freeze Mage and you're against a Druid, you're just not having a fun time. That Wailing Soul will come down. They'll just hold on to it. They will not silence their guys. They will build a board that you have to freeze. You'll freeze it, and then Wailing Soul will come down, and you'll just take 20. Like, Wailing Soul will destroy a Freeze Mage, and that's why I would definitely say this deck is quite heavily favored against Freeze Mage in particular. However, the other combos with this particular card result in it doing absolutely absurd things with Ancient Watcher. And you can use it to get rid of negative effects as well. I've used it to get rid of Aldor Peacekeepers, where I've innovated a Spectral Knight. It's got Aldor Peacekeeper on it, which I'm guessing a lot of people have come across when you innovate something out against a Paladin. They're just like, oh, Lord Peacekeeper. Yeah, you just Wailing Soul it, kill it, and then you have a 4/3 and a 3/5, and he's really far behind. So Wailing Soul is just a straight up 4 mana 3/5. Decent stats, Sen'jin stats, along with its crazy effect that it can be used in this particular engine. Azure Drake, making its first appearance in ages. Yeah, this is because Druid used the spell power in an absolutely insane way. Drawing cards is important, and it keeps the pressure on while not depleting your cards. Now, I can say that the next card, Harrison Jones, for most of these I'll go over a budget type of thing, but Harrison Jones is one of those cards where if you have it, play it. If you don't have it, I would play Drake instead, because it will draw more consistently, it's just not as explosive, and is actually arguably better in certain metagames. If you're running against a lot of hunters who are running like double bow, because they may only be running one bow, but if you're running against a lot of hunters and some shamans, maybe some warriors, Harrison Jones is an all-star. However, if you're running against a lot of zoos and other druids and priests and things like that, run double Azure Drake, they will serve you better. But Harrison Jones is a really, really good card. Definitely a good call as far as tournaments go. You want to be running this in tournaments at the moment because a lot of people will be running Control Warrior and they have Death Spite. Death Spite is a kind of awkward interaction where you kill his Death Spite and it whirlwinds your board, but yeah, you can still get rid of the second durability, and also the Fire War Axes can just leave. So Harrison Jones, very, very good. You can also use it on Doomhammer because you'll be depleting your hand down to about 3 or 4 cards on average. Even with Ancient Allures, you'll have 3 or 4 cards in your hand on average, and Harrison Jones can kill a Doomhammer, draw 6, and you won't overdraw. So very, very good in certain matchups, very, very good in tournaments, definitely. Highly recommend running it in tournaments, and on ladder, it's depending on what you're playing against. Now, Loatheb. Do I really need to talk about Loatheb? You're playing a mid-range deck. You get a board position, you play Loatheb, and your opponent concedes. That has happened to me a lot, actually, because Loatheb is really good against Druids, but you just play it when you have a board position, and then you get extra damage in, and then sometimes you just get them into combo range and they die. So, Loatheb, all-star, as usual, for the 5 drops. Spectral Knight. In Druid, he is abusable beyond belief, because you can innovate him out. Sludge Belcher usually takes this position in ladder because of hunters. However, you can just taunt up your Spectral Knights instead with some Furies, and they are completely untargetable, which is very irritating because most hunters get past big taunts with kill commands and hunter's marks. So as a result, Spectral Knight is a straight 6 HP wall against hunter and against zoo. Against zoo, they can use Power Overwhelming to get past it, but they still can't just get rid of it without a silence of some sort of fashion. So Spectral Knight, really, really good. Definitely the best innervate target in the deck, by the way. Unless you have an Ancient Watcher on the board, then Wailing Soul is. Getting an early Spectral Knight out can be devastating. Now, the last 2 cards here are 2 of the trio of 6 drops. Now, Black Knight and Sylvanas are both very, very good. I would say that if you don't have one of them, just run the third of the 6 drops. So you can run maybe Karen. If you don't have either, I could definitely see running maybe Druid of the Claw. It's difficult to say. I would say the essential legendaries are obviously like Lotheb is essential, Cenarius is replaceable, Harrison can be replaced. These two, I would say that the trio of 6-drops, in particular Black Knight and Sylvanas, have always been useful, and I would probably never disenchant mine because they're always useful. So keeping them is always a good idea. So anyway, that's a basic overview of this particular deck. It's actually the one I'm trying out right now. I'm just messing around on ladder right now with a couple different decks, and I'm trying this one out. It's been working pretty well. I would definitely say that there's a couple different builds you can use with this, because the actual engine, if you think about it, is Wailing Soul, Ancient Watcher, and then by extension Sunfury Protector and Defender. But then the additions this deck has put in is like Zombie Chow, Spectral Knights, just to strengthen the actual engine, Cenarius. But you can actually think about running that particular engine, since the entire engine is neutral, guys. The whole engine is neutral. You could definitely see running this in some other classes, and then running Spellbreakers, and that could definitely work. So that's actually something to think about. What you really get out of Druid is the combo, Keepers, Ancient Allures for draw, and then Innervate. That's what you really get out of Druid in this particular list, and why I think that they run the best Watchers list. However, I could definitely see some other classes pulling it off. Maybe Priest could pull it off, because you can also silence or unorganize when you want them silenced. So I could see Priest pulling it off. I could see Paladin maybe, since they have some pretty good support, and you can use Lay on Hands and a healing engine, and then Tyrion. So I could definitely see Paladin trying it out, or yeah, I could definitely see Paladin, or maybe Priest, or something like that. I think Druid is the best one, but it's always a surprising engine. People don't expect it, so I would definitely try it out in some other classes, see how it goes. As for Druid itself, you could definitely try running a more aggressive version. I could definitely see taking out a lot of this top end and running double Druid of the Claw, and then maybe take out pretty much all the top end and go for double combo. I could definitely see that, and then go double Harvest Golem if you're doing that. But it's difficult to tell. I think that the mid-rangey approach is the best for the current metagame, because it beats the aggro decks and has an okay chance of beating control decks. But it's definitely something to think about. Going full aggro with combo is very, very good against paladins and priests and warriors. You can often just kill them. That's why the token druids were often quite good in those matchups. Well, at least they were at first, because you could just straight up kill them on turn 9. Or turn 7 if you are lucky enough to get an Innervate with the combo. But at the moment, I would say slightly slower, running one combo is probably the way to go. But this is definitely one of the more interesting Druid builds I've seen in a while. And there weren't that many Druids, if I recall correctly. Only 2? Yeah, there was only 2. We're actually just going to look at Lothar's one quickly. I haven't actually seen this particular deck, just to see what kind of thing he was running. So he was running, alright, so yeah, he was running like a mid-rangey ramp list with wild growths, and was just running sort of a control deck with healing touch. So completely different ways of going it. It's interesting to see that Druid is kind of in a weird spot right now, where the ramp druids are a bit subpar, and token druids don't really work. So it's nice to see a different way of looking at it, and I would not be surprised if this particular deck shows its, if it shows its face at BlizzCon, because people don't know how to play against this. I would say that if a lot of the players who are going to BlizzCon are paying attention, they'll test against this. Not like they're expecting to see it, but just in case, because you never know, someone might bring it, just for the sake of shaking things up, even if it's not a tier 1 deck. But anyway, so thank you for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below. If you want to ask any questions about the particular list, since I am playing it quite a lot at the moment, just go ahead and ask. So, sort of any matchups or anything like that, put it out in the comments as well. But anyway, before I go, I will be streaming in about 2 hours from now. So if you want to come watch me play, then check the link in the description, and I'll also put the link to this particular list where you can check all of the other deck lists from the Best of the Best tournament. But as for now, this has been Jotto, signing off.